Alright, we're back to reassemble this Galaxy S5. I finally got the charge port in that I needed to go ahead and replace on this, plus the new glass. You can see that we have our two pieces, the mid frame and the rear housing. And our new glass here that has the plastic still adhered to it. And here is our charge ports. And the disassembly, I'm not sure if it was either I broke it or it was broken before the phone came in. It was really shattered. But either way, we need to replace the charge port on this. We're going to start with the rear housing of the phone first and put some pieces back onto it. The first being the 3.5mm headphone jack. This just kind of inserts back into place, sliding it in towards the top of the frame and then sliding it down. I'm just going to go ahead and just press these pieces back into place. Now, a lot of these cables have little round holes on them where you can go ahead and press them onto like a little post that stands up. Make sure you get it into the right spots. It has to line up with the main board once you put the phone back together to make sure that the connectors hit. I'm just going to use a little spudger here and make sure that it's nice and tight, pressed down. I'm just going to make sure we have the adhesion all the way across it. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and put our loudspeaker in, making sure that the connecting points are down towards the bottom of the phone. There's still enough adhesive on this that it didn't need any additional to hold it into place. So make sure that if you do, I mean, you can throw a little 3M tape on it if you need to, but it looks like on this one I'm not going to. Alright, the next thing is I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the mid frame and put this back together. Put a couple of the smaller pieces in first, the vibration module. Go ahead and put that back on. Making sure that any little round post that the cable needs to sit onto, it's adhered properly. It doesn't look like this one's sticking very well. Looks like it lost a little bit of the double-sided tape that was holding it down. So when that happens, I'm just going to use a nice thin piece of some 3M tape here. I have a 1mm cut. We'll use that to go ahead and put it back into place. Just going to cut off a little tiny bit. Doesn't need a lot. And let's go ahead and put it underneath where the connector is going to sit. You can do this for any real ribbon cable that's on this phone. If you have the same problem with your 3.5mm headphone jack, this is something that you can do to make sure that it stays in place. Alright, now I'll go ahead and just set it back down, making sure that it fits snugly back onto its post. Little round hole at the bottom. Perfect. Another little ribbon cable needs to go in on the side of the phone that we removed. This looks like it has enough adhesive left on it that we're not going to have to do any ribbon tape. Just making sure that all of the posts line up on the cable. Alright, so we have our new charge port here. You can see this is an all-in-one piece. It encompasses the back and the menu, the home button, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the adhesive off the back of it. It's got some metal tape on it, looks like. You can see that it's got that little shiny metal tape all the way across here. I kept the old metal tape on the phone. I wasn't sure exactly what this one was going to come with. Since it does come with that adhesive, I'm going to go ahead and remove this one. That way it sits nice and flush. It'll be as original as possible. Just go ahead and pry this tape off. Alright. The goal is to make sure the home button fits back into the home button hole here on the phone. You can see that there's 2 additional screws for the charge port that'll get screwed back in when reassembling the phone, so make sure those line up correctly as well. You can look through the mid-frame to make sure the holes are lined up. Just pressing down on some of the larger portions of the charge port board here, make sure that the adhesion sticks nice and well. There's a screw that goes into this portion as well. So we'll go ahead and put the screw in. Help hold the new board down. Perfect. Alright, now the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put the buttons back on here. As you can see, there's adhesive covering on both sides. There is a little post that these fit into, so it's really easy to make sure you get them in the right spot. Just make sure that they get nice and adhesed. As it's kind of a fold over cable, it'll try to pull itself off just a little bit. So give it a little bit of pressure to make sure it sticks down nice and good. Do the same thing with the other button. See that where our home button is protruding through. Alright. Go ahead and just test the home button here real quick and see how it functions. Make sure the button gets depressed when it gets put into place, which it does. The next thing is to put in the logic board. You can see that there's a connector on the back side of this logic board. This cable will bend up just a little bit, give you some room to put it back onto the charge port. It's a little tricky since it clips onto the back side. You could technically do this before putting the charge port down, but I just want to make sure I got good adhesion with it. Making sure everything lined up, the camera's back in the right spot, the vibration module is protruding through. There's a screw hole that we want to make sure is lined up on this so we can put it back together as well. Now this mid-frame was a little bit bent. I just bent it back into being straight. So if you're worried about that, that is something that you can do as well if you've had a pretty big accident with your phone. I'm going to go ahead and put the screw back in to hold the top logic board down. Make sure that everything lines up. We're looking good. We go ahead and put this small blue cable connector back on. It attaches the upper logic board down to the bottom charge port board. We'll put the bottom side on first. Now make sure you get this lined up nice and straight before you try to put it back on. You don't want to bend these at all. Go ahead and make sure we put the top portion in first. And then we'll put the cable back into its guiding path onto the mid-frame. It has a little insert that it sits into to make sure it stays out of the way when you're putting your phone back together. Alright, we're looking good. Go ahead and put the home button back in. It just slides through the mid-frame here into this little slot. And then it has a little connector that you just press down back onto the bottom of the logic board here. Just going to test this home button, make sure it's functioning. Now, I'm not really happy with the way that the cable's sitting on this for the home button. And it looks like it's going to get in the way when I try to put the screen back on. We're just going to test it here real quick. Make sure that everything's functioning properly for us. Make sure everything's going to fit nice and well. Now with this being a contained unit, we won't be able to turn the phone on. We'll have to put the rear housing on to actually power it on. But I like to do this as a precaution to make sure that everything's going to be in the right place. I'll have to remove this little piece of tape here. Give me a little extra room to play with the phone. I want to make sure that my mid-frame is nice and straight since it was a little flimsy on this phone. Make sure the battery is going to line up properly. I don't want to take the phone back apart. It's looking good. Everything looks like it's going to line up. Check the home button here real fast. See if it depresses, which it does. Alright, we'll just go ahead and disconnect the screen. Make sure there's no additional pieces that's stuck onto the adhesive on the front. That kind of orange bronzy area. That's where your screen's going to sit against, so you want to make sure there's nothing that protrudes off of it. Double check all the connectors. These little flaps that are hanging off the buttons here. So I'm just going to clip these before I put the mid-frame back on. I don't want to take them off yet. I'm just going to sit onto the glass of the phone. Make sure that everything's nice and well for the mid-frame. Make sure I know where the connecting or clip points are at. You can see that the that little charge port area on the back of the phone is where it's going to have to sit into. You have to slide it in and kind of down into the charge port area, and then press the top in is the way that it sits in the easiest. Wiggle it a little bit. Don't try to force it too hard, but give it a little wiggle. You see it kind of sit into place. And then you can go around the outside of the phone. Just go ahead and clip everything back into its proper spot. Make sure you press down all the sides to make sure all the clips are put back onto the phone itself. Make sure the bottom hatch closes. Perfect. Now that we have our buttons reattached here, we can go ahead and just insert the screen on it. And before I go too much further, just kind of test everything, make sure everything's going to work properly for us. Putting this back on, it seems to be like one of the trickiest parts, getting the screen attached back to the main board. Either that or I'm just really terrible at putting these back together. Could be either or. Making sure the connector is nice and snug on there. Make sure everything's going to function properly for us. Go ahead and put our battery in. Make sure that all the clips are down on the back side of the battery area as well. Check both sides. Go ahead and power the phone on. Definitely looks like it's working. All right. Getting our boot up screen. I'll make sure the touchscreen functions properly for us. Everything looks like it's working well. See if we can get the camera to function. Make sure that the buttons underneath function properly for us before we start to adhere them down. Do as much testing as I can before I put this back together. I don't have the code for this phone. I'll have to factory reset it. But if you can, make sure that you check the Wi-Fi. Make sure everything's functioning properly on the phone for you. So far, what I'm seeing, it looks like everything is working. I didn't want to make an incredibly long video, so I kind of split the reassembly up into two portions. If you want to watch the second portion with the adhesion of the screen, putting back in all the screws, go ahead and hit the link in the bottom left-hand corner of this screen, and I'll show you the remaining portions to finish this phone off. As always, thanks for watching the video, you guys. If you have any comments, go ahead and throw them in the comments. Hit the like button if you found it to be helpful. I'll see you on the second video of the reassembly.